Good evening, everyone. This week we're starting the portion of Achrei-Kedoshim. It's a combined portion, two portions together. I would like to share with you a few divrei Torah from these two portions. So we begin with Kedoshim this week. The beginning of the portion, if you have the Gutnik Chumash, is on page 758. I'm going to read it slowly in English and Hebrew and translate to English. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moshe saying, Daber el kol adat bnei Israel. Speak to the entire Jewish community. Ve'amarta alehem, and say to them, Kedoshim tiyu, be holy, ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokechem. Because I am your God, your Lord is holy. Ish imo ve'aviv tirau, or each person should fear and respect his mother and father, ve'et shabtotai tishmoru, and observe my Shabbats. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am God, your Lord. I want to concentrate on one area of this discussion, and that is God commands Moshe and set forth many, many commandments. In fact, this is one of the largest number of commandments given in one portion. It is number 2 or 3. There is other portions that have more, but very few. So at the outset, God says, Daber el kol adat bnei Israel, speak to the entire community. And as the commentators tell us, Moshe had to assemble the entire Jewish people to hear the following commandments. The question is, why is it that Hashem wants them to gather the entire community? What's wrong with the ordinary passing of commandments, which was given to Moshe? Moshe gives it to Aaron. Aaron teaches to his sons teaches us to the elders, and the elders teach it to the rest of the Jewish people. Here, they all had to hear the commandments together at the same time in an assembly that included all of the Jewish people. So here are 3 explanations. I'm going to say first Rashi, and then I will expand based on the Rebbe's explanation. Rashi said, and I'm reading it on the classic questions on page 758, this teaches us that this parsha was said to the assembled congregation of Israel because most of the fundamental teachings of the Torah depend on it. Rashi says that the foundation, the fundamental teachings of the entire Torah are found in this week. Because it is so important, therefore, he had to tell it to the entire Jewish people at the same time. Soon we will find out a little bit better understanding to it. A second one, Maskil David, I will summarize for the sake of time. Maskil David says that there is nothing new in this week's portion. Every single commandment that's given in this week's portion, totaling 51 commandments, 13 positive and 38 negative, are all already said before. However, said the Maskil David, in this week's portion, the details and the practical application of the commandments are given. And therefore, the entire Jewish people needed to hear it rather than hearing it 4th or 5th generation step below when it came from God through Aaron and his children and the elders. The Midrash gives us another explanation. The Midrash says that there are 3 places in which Moshe is teaching us one chapter that includes 60 commandments. One is when it comes to the law of Passover, it includes 60 different commandments. The second is the law of damages, which we read about 5-6 weeks before. And the third one is in this week's portion. It includes 60 different commandments, and therefore they are so important that they needed to be said in public. The Rebbe is asking, what is so unique that it had to be given this week's portion and the laws in the assembly of the entire Jewish people. And the Rebbe proves that Rashi is trying to tell us something very important. The following is a summary of what Rashi is teaching us instead of reading it. And I also want to get to a practical application. And that is, says the Rebbe, until now, the commandments were given from Moshe to Aaron, then to the sons, to the elders and the Jewish people. But it was not about practical living day to day. However, at this point, God is telling Moshe to teach the Jewish people how to actually perform the commandments, how to observe Shabbat, how to honor one's father and mother, how to be honest in business, how not to cheat or steal, how not to lie or covet. And therefore, says the Rebbe, the way Rashi explained, that's the fundamental of Judaism, depends on it. Because we're dealing with practical application in day-to-day, it had to have been given directly from God to the assembly, to the entire assembly, without going through the normal channel of commandments from Moshe to Aaron, to his sons, to the elders of the Jewish people. And that's why, even though as the Medrash tells us, as the Maskil David tells us, nothing new, there is no new commandment in this week. It's a repeat of other commandments that were given before. Yet, due to the fact that it includes commandments which needed to be performed and applied to day-to-day life, it had to have been given directly from Moshe to the Jewish people without any intermediaries. I think it comes to teach us, to me, the application is how important it is when it comes to actual following God's commandments. When we study Torah, it's up to different understandings. You have Rashi, you have Tosfot, you have Jerusalem Talmud, you have Babylonian Talmud. It's all God's Torah. You have many people who connect with one teacher or one way of understanding part of the Torah. However, when it comes to performance of the mitzvot, it does not depend on how I understand it. It does not depend what makes sense to me. It depends on the giver and what the giver's intention is. And when it comes to the giver's intention and what he expects from us, it's only one way. That's why it has to be said in a very clear, concise way. That's why it should not be up to different understandings and interpretations, but it should come directly from God. The way God says, that's the way you perform. And that's why in this week's portion, even though it contains no new mitzvah, yet it is unique in the way that it was given to the Jewish people. God tells them, Daber el kol bnei adat bnei Israel, speak to the entire Jewish camp, because you want to make sure that everybody hears it directly, and there are no interpretations, there are no second understanding, there are no people who can say, I like it this way, or I don't like it that way, but rather everybody follows in the same way. That's the first point I wanted to share with you. The next one I want to share with you, again, with a practical application in our day-to-day life. You may find it on page 761. I'm going to read the text in English, and then we'll go into a very interesting point of discovery that the Hasidic teaching finds. The second point reads the following. I'm reading verse number 5 on page 761. I will summarize so that if you don't have the book, you can still follow and be part of the discussion. The Torah reads, when you slaughter a peace offering to God, a peace offering is a type of offering, a sacrifice for God. You must slaughter it with the correct intentions for it to be accepted favorably for you by God. Continue the Torah. It must be slaughtered with the intention that it will be eaten on the day you slaughter it or on the next day. For anything left over until the third day must be burned on fire. If it was slaughtered with the intention of eating it outside its prescribed area or with the intention of being eaten on the third day, It is repulsive to God, and it will not be accepted favorably by him. Let me summarize. When it comes to sacrifices, there is a set time and place. We're not dealing with the place now. Location is another topic. We're talking about timing. When someone is bringing a sacrifice, either a sin offering or a thankful offering or a piecemeal where he's about to share and show with the priest or thank God for his blessings, there is a very limited amount of hours by which it can be consumed. Usually it's a night and a day, or it's 2 days, 1 night, 2 days and 1 night. If anything is left past the 2 days, it is repulsive, it is forbidden, it becomes treif, and it must be burnt. However, there is one more detail in the requirement, which is when the priest slaughters the animal to be brought as an offering to God, he must have it in mind that he is going to allow it to be consumed for only the amount that is allowed. The same are the owners who stand, the man who brought the offering and stand next to the priest. When the priest is slaughtering the animal, he must think in his mind that he's going to consume the entire animal with his family or friends if they're allowed to participate, only for the set amount of days, 1 day and 1 night, or 2 days and 1 night. What happens if the person had in mind that he's going to eat it for a week, or he's going to keep it in the refrigerator for the weekend? It is repulsive, and the sacrifice is disqualified and is not kosher. He did not fulfill the mitzvah of bringing a sacrifice. If he had an obligation to bring a sacrifice, he must bring a second one. Here is the way the Rebbe points out a very interesting outcome based on what I shared with you. I'm reading in the Sparks of Chassidut, leftover sacrificial meat. I am going to read it because I do believe that the way the Rebbe explains is beautiful. The Rebbe says the following on page 760 in the gray box. If, when sacrificing a peace offering, a person has the intention of living over some of its meat past the prescribed time, then the entire sacrifice will not be accepted favorably by God. If, however, a person slaughtered the sacrifice with the intention of eating the meat within the correct time, but then he actually eats it after the time limit elapsed, then while he has indeed profaned what is holy to God, his sin does not invalidate the entire sacrifice. Ask the Rebbe. At first glance, this appears to be logical, for if we merely intend to eat part of its meat past the correct time, it invalidates the whole sacrifice, whereas if he actually did so, only the part of sacrifice that was left over becomes invalid. Surely the act of living over sacrificial meat should be more severe than mere intention to do so. The Rebbe is asking very simple. If when the animal is slaughtered, I had in mind to keep it for longer than the 2 days, the entire sacrifice is disqualified. I can't use it, I cannot consume it, and I have to bring another one. But if I had the proper intention, but I actually left a piece past the time, the sacrifice is valid. I fulfilled the mitzvah, it is repulsive, I have to burn that piece that's left, but the entire sacrifice is a good sacrifice. The question is, how is it possible that action is not as severe as intention? If I had the wrong intention, the entire sacrifice, even though I didn't do anything, the entire sacrifice is gone. If I actually had the wrong action, the sacrifice is good, and only the part that's left past the time must be burnt. Here is the Rebbe's explanation in the Rebbe's words, a summary of the Rebbe's word. The explanation here is that thought is a general faculty which pervades all the activities that follow in its wake, whereas an action is more specific, limited to one deed in particular. and the Rebbe explains that an incorrect intention when offering a sacrifice is thus a general disqualification of the entire sacrifice, whereas the actual living over the sacrificial meat is a particular disqualification, which does not have the power to invalidate the entire procedure which were carried out correctly. In our daily lives, this teaches us the importance of faith, which is a general aspect of Judaism. A flaw in a person's faith will negatively affect the observance of all the mitzvot he performs. Whereas a flaw, for example, in the strings of a person's tzitzit will not compromise his ability to observe the mitzvah of tefillin properly. David says that when it comes to action, you can always fix it. It's specific to that specific area of deed. And when a person is acting inappropriately, there is a way to fixing it. And if not, the rest of his deeds are correct. But when it comes to a mitzvah that's involving intention, that's when something is not right. It affects the entire human being, including all their actions. For example, faith in God. If someone has trouble with faith in God, issues in faith in God, it affects every single part of his behavior. All the commandments the person performs are, so to say, not the proper way. Whereas if someone is lacking in one mitzvah of tefillin or Shabbat, for example, the rest of his day, he can perform any mitzvah. That's why in the sacrificial intention is more important than action. When someone left in action, he left a piece past the 2 days, that piece is inappropriate, but the sacrifice is validated. However, is valid. However, if he had the wrong intention, the entire sacrifice is inappropriate. Any questions so far? If anybody has a question, you can, I'm going to unmute just in case someone, if you have any questions, you can ask me now before I move to the next topic. No questions? Okay, great. Now we're going to move on to the one more part that I wanted to share with you, and that is regarding robbery, theft and robbery, page 763. I'm going to read to you. This is a commandment given in this week's portion. God says, you should not steal money. We're not allowed to steal, theft. The next one, no man among you should make a false denial or false oath against his fellow man. Sorry. You should not swear falsely to any of my names, thereby profaning the name of your God. I am God. You should not oppress your fellow by withholding his wages, and you shall not rob. A daily hired worker wage should not be withheld by you overnight until morning. So this is a list of commandments appearing in this week's portion. I want to talk about robbery. I am going to share with you the following. We're going to discuss what is exactly the difference between robber and a thief. Number two, what is so bad about a robber that's worse than a thief? Number three, how a person becomes a robber. Number four, how does a person repent? And we will see how the Rebbe explains that. So again, first let's talk about the difference between a robber and a thief. They are both against God, and they are both mentioned in this week's portion, as I just read, but there is a distinct difference between them. The Rambam writes that a thief is someone who takes someone else's possession in hiding. He does it at night when no one was watching. when when a robber comes to take, he does it in public and by force. So he comes to a person with a knife or a weapon and he's demanding the good. He takes it in front of other people as well. That's the difference between a thief and a robber. Why is it so? What's so worse about a robber? Says the Rambam that a robber is worse than a thief because any person who robs from another so much as a pruta, which is a small coin like a nickel, is considered to have taken his life away. As the verse says, so are the ways of every one who is greedy of gain. It takes away the life of its owners. Maimonides said to us that a robber is worse than a thief because a robber, even when he robs something as small as a nickel, is equal, tantamount to taking the life away from a person. Tosfot says, you know why Rambam writes it? Because maybe that man was a very poor man, and with that nickel, he could have buy himself water to drink. And by taking away the coin from him, he couldn't buy a drink, and he died. So it can cause someone to die. That's Tosfot, explaining Maimonides. So again, a thief is in hiding, a robber is openly. What's so bad about robbery? According to Maimonides in Jewish law, meaning it's part of law, that taking away from somebody something forcefully, even as small as a nickel, one puta, is equal to taking someone's life. Tosfot tried to explain why Maimonides says that, and Tosfot explains that maybe the man was so poor that that's the last thing that he had to be able to survive. He could not now buy himself a drink or food to revive himself, and he died. The Medrash, how does a person becomes a robber? This is Maimonides' explanation. Rambam says that desire is the mother of all evil. Why? Desire leads to coveting, and coveting leads to robbery. Why? For if the owner does not wish to sell a certain object, despite being offered a large sum of money and being urged to do so by colleagues, then a robbery may result. And if the owner stands up against the robber and tries to defend his property, an act of murder may follow. Rambam writes that the beginning is coveting. When I see someone in possession of something I like, I don't have it, I try first to offer him money. And if not, if he refuses, I try to send friends to convince him. And if that doesn't help, I go at a gunpoint and say to him, give it to me. Now, if he refuses to give it to me, the person may use the weapon to kill. So therefore, robbery is going to lead into murder, according to Maimonides, and it starts from coveting, just coveting someone else's goods or someone else's possession. The Rebbe is asking many questions. The Rebbe is asking, I'm going to summarize very few questions. Asking, A, how is it possible by taking a nickel, a pruta from a man, it is equal to taking away someone's life? After all, we study in the Torah, there are many occasions when someone damages someone else's, someone took away or hiding or using force to damage, to hurt a person. There's all kinds of punishment, but no other act is compared to murder. Here, robbery is the only time, according to Jewish law. Rambam did not write it in the explanation to Torah. Rambam puts it in code of law, meaning it's part of Jewish law, that robbery is just like murder. And especially with dealing with a nickel, Rambam writes clearly that anytime you take someone else's coin, even as small as one puta, a nickel, is considered like robbery. In addition, the Tosfot explains that maybe the man was so poor that with that he was able to buy himself a sandwich or a cup of water, and now he couldn't buy it, and he died. Says the Rebbe, this is so unusual and so it's almost never happens. Yet Rambam writes, anytime someone robs someone, it is considered as if he is equal to taking someone's life. In addition, says the Rebbe, if the reason is because the person might have been able to buy water with that coin, why is it only to robbery? What's wrong with thieves? A thief can also steal someone's coin, and that man now cannot buy himself water to survive, and he dies. Yet Rambam does not say that a thief is equal to a robber. He only says that a thief is equal to murder. He only says that a robber is equal to murder. And the following is the Rebbe's explanation. I'm reading on page 763 in the explanation. The Rebbe has other questions that we don't have the time. The Rebbe says, the reason why the Torah compares robbery to ending life is not because it could lead in some way or another to a person's actually passing away. It's not because if the person will stand against the robber, will shoot him or kill him. It's not because he's going to be able to buy water and to survive and now he's going to die. Rather, the act of robbery deprives the victim of some of the inherent rights that life brings. Just taken away by force something from someone else is taken away what life is. And the Rambam explains it in the following way. And this is the case regardless of how much money was taken. Now, the act of robbery, it does not matter if the robbery was involved $1 million, $500,000, $100, or one coin. Why? When a person suffers a robbery, it is not merely that his assets have decreased as a result of an unlawful act, as in the case of theft. Rather, when a robbery occurs, the person's rightful ownership of an object is openly challenged and taken away by force. The robber says, I am denying you the fundamental human right of owning your own property, which in a certain respect is depriving a person of the privilege of being alive. Hence, it is as if he took his life away. Rambam writes, it doesn't have to lead to murder. It doesn't have to lead to a person who is so poor that he couldn't buy himself water with the coin. Just the act of robbery to challenge and take someone else's possession is depriving the basic human rights that Torah granted us, that whatever we own belongs to us and no one else has the right to it. So when I take something from someone and challenging his right to it, it is equal to taking his life. For the short of time, I just want to say that the Rebbe goes on to say that also the trauma involved in robbery is something that does not compare to anything. When it comes to thievery, he did not challenge him face to face, and therefore he did not face the trauma of being challenged by a robber, which in addition is taken away part of his life. That's why the Rebbe explains that when it comes to repentance, when a robber wants to repent and he does not have the good, the rabbis discourage the person who was robbed to accept the monetary value. The reason is because the monetary, to return back the money for what he had taken, is not a proper representation for what he has done. He has taken away life by robbing somebody. And therefore, the only thing he can do is teshuvah, because repairing it through giving back what I have taken will not suffice by Jewish law, is not good enough because he has taken away his life. I hope I made myself clear, and I want to thank you for staying up with me for the entire study, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. I just want to remind you that Saturday night we're going to have Avdallah live on Facebook. At 9 p.m., everybody is invited, and next Monday, every morning, we have a daily minyan at 8 o'clock. I joined this morning, part of it, and I loved it too very, very much. And also Monday morning at 9:30, we'll study the Torah portion. Not the Torah portion, I mean a Talmud, Sanhedrin. I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Very good.